We are guilty, born in sin, but we are also guilty because this sin nature is the very reason that we break and violate the law of God. So we have a double problem. Problem number one, we have the sin that we were born with, and we're guilty because of that. Problem number two, we have this law of God that we are commanded to keep. And because of the sin that we're born with, we are wholly unable and unwilling to keep this law. So any man born of ordinary generation is going to have this same problem. Number one, God requires those of us who are born under the law to keep the law and be actually righteous. But you will not and cannot keep the law and be actually righteous because you're born under the federal headship of Adam and with a sin nature. You're in trouble. What has to happen? The seed of the woman has to be born without a sin nature, number one. And number two, he has to be born under the law and keep the whole law so that he can be actually righteous. Which is why this is God's son. Because he is the only one who can be born without a sin nature and can keep the whole law. Why is this significant? I'm glad you asked. Because he has to fulfill two sides of the redemption coin. Through what is often referred to as his active and his passive obedience. In his active obedience, he keeps the whole law. And he is actually righteous, which is important because that means he can impute actual righteousness to you and to me. And you can't stand before God without actual righteousness. And you can't gain that righteousness because you're born in sin. So Christ keeps the whole law and is actually righteous, and he can impute that righteousness to you. But then, as a man, Christ can actually take the penalty that we owe to God for our sin and deal with the other side of it. So that now there can be a double imputation. My sin imputed to Christ, who is born of a woman and can therefore have my sin placed on him because the sin belongs to man. But because he's the God man, his righteousness can be imputed to me. So that Christ can die a vicarious, substitutionary, atoning death on my behalf, satisfying the wrath of God against my actual sin and my inherited sin, and imputing to me the righteousness that is required for me to stand before God in right standing and righteousness. This is why, when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law. Why? Because as Isaiah says, all we like sheep had gone astray. Each of us had turned to his own way. We're ruined. We're ruined. But what happens? God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us in order that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Christ died for sin once for all, the just for the unjust, in order that he might bring us back to God.